Hey everybody, this is Michael here at Game Changerz. It is Friday the 13th of November. We are currently on COVID lockdown. Got the store completely closed up, so we figured today was as good a day as any to start our first episode of our Filthy Friday series, where we take you guys along for the ride while we do a full deep clean and thermal compound replacement on a particularly filthy system. This time around, we've got a really interesting PlayStation 4 for you guys, so let's get right into it. All right, now this one is telling us that it has issues with overheating. Let's plug it in, see what it does. So we got the cables plugged in for testing. Let's turn it on and see what we see. A lot of the times these will only overheat when you run a pretty graphically intensive game. So we may end up spending a minute testing it out before we do the deep clean. But either way, let's see what it does here. There goes the fan. At least it's spinning. That's good. Probably will not need a new fan on this one. Oh, goodness. Oh, let me bring the microphone a little closer so you guys hear that. Oh, gosh. That is one hell of a noise. Well, it didn't like that. It just shut itself right off. So clearly something going on in there. Let's crack it open, take a look, see if we can figure out what, because that's about as severe as it gets. I don't think we see those very often at all. So let's pull this off of there. Take the initial look inside. Let's see what we see here. Yeah, not too bad. You can definitely see some dust build up here, but definitely nothing that would warrant it freaking out like that. Let's pull the other half of the top off here, see if it is substantially worse. It has been opened before. Oh, take a look at that. The back has some cracking going on right there. It's not been well taken care of, it looks like. All right, let's see what we get. Ugh. Okay. This came off. That's supposed to be adhered to this. And looks like it has been removed at some point, because this is just covered in filth right here. Just all sorts of nastiness on that adhesive. This is supposed to be in the way so that can't happen. So this has been pulled off at some point to allow that in there. And we've got some dust build up right up in here. You can see the fan from here, but I'm still not seeing anything that would be a particularly big red flag. There is a little bit of buildup right over here. I'll see if I can take some pictures as we go along through this. There we go. Get some snapshots for you guys. Oh, look at that. We're missing a screw. Somebody's been in here before. How much you guys want to bet that they did not reinstall the processor clamp properly? Let's take a look on the other side before we pull the main board out. Oh, look at that. Ooh, that does not want to let go. Side just clipped back in. Okay, got that side. I'm gonna go ahead and get this side. And pull it off of there. All right, so good news. I don't see any sign of roaches or any other bugs. That's always a deal breaker for me. I do not touch that stuff. But we do have some nastiness built up there, so that's going to be fun to clean up. The fan itself doesn't look too bad. Let's give it a little manual spin here. It doesn't sound off balance. Normally, it'll give you some sort of repetitive thunking sound or something, and it does look like a piece has fallen off already, so we'll set that aside. Go ahead and pull the power supply out, take a look underneath there. Nice and slow so we don't crack the plastic that it's screwed into. We got a T10 and a Phillips that we're using on this, in case you guys are wondering. As far as the type of screws that we see on these, those are the only two drivers you need, just a medium to small Phillips and a T10 Torx bit. This is the Gen 2 PS4, by the way. For those of you astute viewers at home, you may have already realized that this is the version that doesn't have the capacitive buttons, it has the touch buttons, which are much nicer as far as not having phantom disc ejecting and haunted PlayStations. But they also have a physical button that can break on the board, so you got to watch out for that. Looking a little filthy. Not the worst, to be honest. Even if this system ends up not being super gross, I won't be surprised at this point, just because there has clearly been previously been worked on, and 9 times out of 10 when you hear the fan kick up that fast, that immediately, then it's not properly clamped down, or potentially might not have any thermal compound at all. That's another possibility. All right, let's go ahead, since we're on this side, we'll go ahead and pull the disk drive out of there. Part of the deep clean and thermal job includes cleaning off the rollers on these drives, because they tend to get filthy, and then the discs will just kind of like scooch in there nice and slow, and you don't want that. Sometimes they'll get so bad that you can't even eject a disc out, and it'll be stuck in there forever until you come get the disk drive cleaned out. So don't want that. We don't want to get everything apart, clean it all the way out, put it all the way back together, and then it doesn't feed discs. So cover all our bases. Okay. Unplug this. Lift it right on out of there. Oh. And sure enough, lots of dust built up in the drive. I'll get you guys a snapshot of that as well that you can take a look at here. So that's no bueno. We're gonna need to clean that up before we can put everything back together. And what have we here? Okay. Yeah, the hard drive screw apparently has a hole that goes right through and bumps up against the disk drive. That's kind of a surprise. Alrighty. We'll pull out the hard drive. And then we'll be ready to take this shell off and take a look at the board and see exactly what's wrong, because I guarantee right here underneath that plate something is not right. They either forgot to put thermal compound on there or put the clamp on upside down. Any number of things can cause that, but it's definitely something right there. So, and we're missing a screw here. That's not ideal. So our current missing screw count is 2. Put that up in the corner. All right, let's pull the lid off and see what we can see. Bruh. It's upside down. This little bumpy bit right here needs to be pushing down on the processor, and that's why we're not getting a good response from the cooling system. It's not cooling the chip at all because it's not pressing the chip up against the cooling system. Let's take a look here. So yeah, that's upside down. And then this guy. All right, so let's take a little video tour over the board here. So there is a fine layer of dust built up all over it. But my biggest concerns, aside from the upside downedness of that, we got a little bit of what looks like moisture intrusion right there. It seems to have stopped before it got into the actual board components. Let's take a look on the other side of the board here. We'll unplug the fan and the ribbon cable there, and all right, pretty filthy, but definitely seen worse. And it looks like it must have pulled this off at some point and then left the original factory thermal compound on there. That hard gray stuff, as dried up and crusty as that is, kind of turns into a powder when you wipe it gently. That's not a replacement thermal compound. That's been in there for a while, so it's not gonna do its job. You never want to reuse thermal compound. It's one and done. If you get it on there, you get a good connection, you pull it off, you cannot put it back on after you've pulled it off, because it gets little air bubbles in there and then it stops doing its job. It needs to form a nice, smooth, uninterrupted layer of thermal conductivity between the processor and the cooling system. And so whenever I pull a processor off of a heatsink, I always clean this old thermal compound up first, because it has a way of getting in to places that you don't expect. It gets on the palm of your hand, just squishes in there, because you'll put your hand down on it, not realizing that you're doing it just out of habit, and it squishes in, and then it like transfers from your hand to the rest of the whole system. It's real gross. This stuff is so hardened up I can pick it up with tweezers. Gross old thermal compound. It is supposed to be a liquid, not this. All right. So we are most of the way down into this board, but we are going to go all the way. So let's get these last screws off of here. We're going to pull the fan completely out of there, but we have to get this plate out of the way first. You guys ready? This is usually where the gross is. Oh, well, look at that. Moderate levels of grossness. What a letdown. Was really expecting this to have a full blanket of garbage in there. Oh, no, found it. Found it. Hey. A little dust bunny. That's a big boy too. Big chunky bunny. We're gonna throw that right in the trash. We're gonna set this aside. We're gonna pull the fan off. Got one last screw holding the fan in. Oh, look at this. We got a few little buddies here. There's a dust bunny. There's a couple of dust bunnies in there. We got one here. You know what? I'm gonna need to order gloves. All right. Ooh. All right, there's the fan. So that's the mid frame. That's as torn apart as this thing can get. Doesn't go any further than that. So I'm gonna take that out with a toothbrush and an air compressor and just scrub the bejesus out of it. Just scrub the fire out of it. Get it as clean as we can, and I'll be right back. Scrub it, scrub it, scrub it. Brush it, brush it, brush. Scrub it, scrub. Scrub, scrub, scrubbity, scrub. A little better? Yeah. Now we're talking. Now we got to start assembling it again, but the last thing that we want to do is put a filthy fan back in there. And even though it didn't look too terribly bad, we can do better. So we got this bad boy right there. As you can see, there is some gross going on. So we're gonna take one of our specialty toothbrushes, which is just what we call a regular toothbrush that has been taken out of service. We're not using that in a mouth. That'd be gross. And we are just gonna scrub at it. It's gonna over a trash can here. Get it nice and clean. Why does console dust always smell like fabric softener? Yeah. Well, we loosened some of it up. I'm gonna go blow it out. All right. From here on out, it's not too bad. Doesn't take much. Just a Q-tip. Gonna get the frame all nice and cleaned up. So it's really important to get as much of this dust out of there as you can. Because any of this dust that you leave behind will attract other dust. And you don't want that. All right, so I'll just take my little jiggly puffer, puffball it out. All right, looking a little better, a little cleaner. Slap that back in there. Screw it back in. Next up is this bad boy. This is the heat sink I showed you guys earlier. We're gonna smack that with the compressed air. Be right back. Alrighty. We got a lot of the dust off of there, but not all of it. So as you can see, it's looking a lot better, but it's still not perfect. I'm gonna wipe it down with a rag. Sometimes the type of dust can vary from, you know, easily blown off fine grains, almost like microscopic sand, all the way up to like a goopy, thick, like definitely filled with vape juice, kind of gross mush. And I'd say we get a pretty good number of both in here. This time around, we're closer to the goopier side. It's kind of sticking on there and not wanting to cooperate. Alrighty. Then the most important part of this is going to be getting as much of the dust out of this as we can. So we're going to take a toothbrush to it again, just so you can see the kind of motion I'm doing here. It's a kind of from the plate up towards the edge, reaching it in there on both sides, getting it in there. And that's not necessarily to remove the dust as much as loosen it, so we can take our jiggly puffer, puff it on out of there. If you end up with some really persistent stuff, you gotta use more high-powered air compressor, but this time around it worked out nicely. So we'll just tag this boy back down with the 3 screws that it goes with. 1, 2, 3, yeah. All right, then we got to clean up the board itself. It's not too bad, but if you look, you can see some dust built up here around the ports. On the other side, there's just kind of like a fine layer of dusting. I don't know how well the camera's going to pick it up, but we're going to be delicate with this one. So normally I have a rag that I wipe things down with. I will not be using that on the board because there are a bunch of tiny little components that can all get ripped off of there if you're just unlucky with the fibers. So toothbrush and Q-tip only. Alrighty, and if you remember right here, we had that section where there was a little bit of sign of water damage. So we're gonna hit that with a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol, just to be real thorough. Want to make sure that if there is anything on there that's still moist or actively spreading corrosion for any reason, that we get that neutralized, displaced, removed, whatever buzzword you prefer. We want to stop the problem from spreading. Okay, that's feeling smooth. I think that's as good as we're gonna get that. All right, so we can't put the board back on without thermal compound. We like to use this Ceramique 2 by Arctic Silver. So this stuff, I can put a link in the description if you prefer. Ooh, come on, focus. Thank you, camera. That's the stuff dreams are made of. I'm just gonna put a little dibbledy dab right in the middle. Some people can get really picky about the amount of thermal compound. I am not so picky. It's really hard to accidentally not put enough on there because this stuff spreads real thin. And if you put a little too much on there, you lose some thermal efficiency. But on PS4, it's not like you're overclocking the bad boy, you know, like, just needs to work reliably. All right. We'll put the clamp on the right way this time. So they had this part on right. That was fine. But this guy, they had it dimple up. We don't want dimple up. We want dimple down. Easy to remember. DD, dimple down. Put it on there. Screw it in place. Nice solid stop when you're on the right spot. Like you don't need to worry about over tightening these because they will stop dead. So once they stop. All right, next up we got this guy. These guys are almost never that filthy. We're gonna wipe this down with our rag, and if we need to, we'll hit it with some Windex. If we do use the Windex on it though, we gotta be doubly, triply careful to really dry it off afterwards. If you leave even just one little drop of Windex on the main board, it can ruin the system permanently. So I use it sparingly and only in a few situations, and I'm always very careful to really thoroughly dry it off afterwards. Toothbrush. Yep, we're gonna need the Windex. Windex, toothbrush, away from the workspace. There we go. Easy peasy. We're gonna keep it away from that board while we do this. We don't want any splash damage. Only for the really stuck on stuff. Okay. And we'll rag it all off of there. Oh yeah, that's a good looking metal plate. Yeah, baby. You'd eat off of that. I'm not going to, though. All right, so we just lay it down, screw it all back together. Montage time. Alrighty, so now we've got that all nice and ready to go. We'll use our puffer on the hard drive a little bit. Hard drives don't usually build up too much dust, but they are sensitive to heat. So if your system overheats, it can cook your hard drive. But more often than not, if your system doesn't tell you it's overheating, but it does get particularly hot, just not hot enough to shut down, it'll slow roast your hard drive. I see it all the time. So if you notice that your hard drive needs to be replaced every year or so, maybe bring it in for a deep clean and thermal. Our power button. We have to be dainty with this one because it has a bunch of tiny little parts that just kind of break off if you aren't soft with them. Gotta be delicate. And oh, look at this. It is just the most stubborn dirt ever. So if we have to be delicate and we have stubborn dirt, we've got to use the Windex. No way around it. Scrubby, scrubby. I would love to be able to just run this between a rag, you know what I mean? Like just kind of But all these little pieces will break right off if I do that, so. Okay. Got a dry toothbrush for drying it off. Looking gravy. All right, so we're done with this side. Let's flip it over. And it's time for the disk drive. Ooh, talk about filthy. This one has seen better days, so go ahead and pull the top off of it. You know what? Before we do anything with it, I'm gonna hit it with the air compressor. So it's still gross. A lot of that dust just did not let go, especially on the darker parts. They show up really well. So we'll toothbrush this guy too. All right, that made a difference. Let's crack it open and take a look inside. Not bad, not bad. A nice cleanup anywhere we see the dust. Do not touch the laser. If you think the laser's dirty, don't toothbrush it. That's bad. Worst case scenario, if you really do need to clean up the laser, if it's not reading games and you think that might be part of it, use a Q-tip with rubbing alcohol and just very, very, very gently. If you're pressing down on it, you're doing it wrong. Very gently. You want the alcohol to do the work, not the Q-tip. The Q-tip's there just to get the alcohol in place. I forgot to mention this though, always make sure that when you pull this top plate off of the drive, that you've got the drive in the fully ejected position. Never pull this top plate off when there's a disc in there, because then you got to manually move a few other things to get it ready for the top back on there. It won't just go back on nicely. You're going to cause yourself a real headache. That little maneuver is going to cost you at least 10 minutes. So just eject the disc before you pull it off. Cool. Now the thing that causes the discs to move in slowly or fail to eject, all of that goodness, are these two rollers right here, and they need to be nice and clean. So we're going to hit them with some rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip, and we're going to take our Phillips head, we're going to stick it in this little tube right here, right here. You can see, and stick it in there, and there is a little gear in there with a Phillips head attachment that you can just spin to spin the rollers to get all the way around them, get them cleaned up, top, bottom, front, back, the whole shebang. You want to get them nice and clean, not a speck of dust on them if you can avoid it, and then you want to get them nice and dry. You don't want to leave that rubbing alcohol on there and let it dry on its own, because it'll leave a little film, a little residue, which is almost as bad as the dust. All right, so we got a little bit off of there. You can see some of it. A little gross. If I can get it lined up, yep. All of that was on just the rollers, so we got that nice and cleaned up. It should feed quickly and smoothly without any issues now. Help if we put it on the right way, huh? Okay, we're gonna put our screws back in, put this baby back in. Doo-doo. So I am going to clean this up because there is a little bit of dust in it. This is your antenna here. We need to be very careful with that because it is a very small, very fine solder job on there. And if we have to redo that solder, it's going to take some time and it's going to be less than fun. There we go. It's a little better than it was. Give the whole drive a once over, look for anything that we might have missed, anything that was sitting at a weird angle we didn't see it. Get as much of that dust off of there as possible. Okay, we got our screws for the drive. Next up is the power supply. Now this one you got to be careful with because it is full of capacitors that can shock you. And I have seen repair techs reach in there with a wet Q-tip and shock themselves. So we want to avoid that. We're going to hit it. You know what? It's a little bit grosser than your usual power supply. I'm going to hit this with the big guns. I'll be right back. All right, the high-powered air compressor did the trick. This thing is pretty much as good as it's gonna get. So we'll wipe down the outside, make sure any bits of dust that are left out there get cleaned up. We cannot really reach in there and physically clean it because if you go too far in, you hit a capacitor, you shock your finger, you have a bad day. But the air compressor did its work, so we are good. Make sure when you plug this back in that these two little posts right here, make sure that they line up with these two little slots right here, because we see a lot of the time these get squished together and crushed down in there when people try to put their power supplies back in. That's a bad time. It'll not boot up at all if you do that. All that's left is the outer shell. We do still need to clean those before we can put them on there. So here's how it looks now. Let's go hit it with the compressed air. All right, that got some of it, but not nearly all of it. So we're gonna need to use the rag, the Windex, the toothbrushes, and maybe the Q-tips. We'll see. We've got all the electronic parts set aside so that we don't have to worry about getting them Windexed. Or just really scrub it up. All right, looking a lot better. Okay. Now, if you remember, this guy had come off of there completely. We're going to take this crappy, old, dirty, useless garbage adhesive off of there, and we're going to replace it with some fresh stuff that isn't garbage. First, we're going to clean these up, and then we're going to re-adhere it. So all right, to line this up, you just have a little notch right here. It sits on a little bump right there. And then everything just kind of lays flat. And then the front clips in underneath this little piece here. Right there. Clips in there. Notches on there, right? So let's put some adhesive on it so that it'll stay in place. We've got this red stuff. I don't know if there's any brand name to it, but see it all over the internet, so get it on there real nicely. Pull the red backing off, and then it's just double-sided tape at that point. Oh, I missed a bit. Here. And we're good. And then we've got our back screw. This piece fell off. I'm not going to reattach it. I don't think it serves any purpose. It's deceptive to do so. But I will put the screw back in just so that it doesn't get lost. It's not really doing anything at this point, but I think it's better to have it than to not have it. We'll put in the screw for the bottom while we're here. And then our final piece is going to be the plate that covers the hard drive. Let's plug it in and test it out. So far, so good. Nice and quiet. All right, so it's going to take a second to boot up. It's checking system storage because when it overheated last time, it didn't boot off properly, and that can cause issues with the hard drive, so it's checking right now. Nice and quiet. I'll move the microphone close so you can hear that there's nothing. Quiet as a mouse. All right. You know what? Since we are here, let's just make sure that it feeds and reads disks properly. Nothing in there now. Put in our copy of Spaceballs. Feeds in nicely. Spinning up. And it works. All right, so let's go ahead and turn it off. All in all, not a bad deep clean. Wasn't that gross inside, though there was some gross negligence when they tried to work on it themselves. So flip that clamp over and everything's good to go. So they're not paying for this. This is just a little extra something we like to throw in, but we're going to go ahead and clean up the outside. We'll give you a little quick rub down montage. All right, well, that wasn't so bad. We've got it looking nice. It's ready to go. It's a nice, clean, and beautiful PlayStation 4, running smooth and quiet for our customer. It was really interesting seeing what had been done to it previously and just how much of a difference it can make. I don't think I've ever heard a PlayStation 4 try so hard to take off from the bench, but we got this one all fixed up and it's ready to go. We're hoping to do these once a week, so follow along. Like the video if you liked it. Don't like it if you didn't like it. Subscribe and make sure you hit the little bell if you want to be kept up to date when we release our next Filthy Friday video. We will also be releasing some tutorials, some Can We Fix It's, a few other fun video ideas in mind. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching us here on Game Changers.